Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Divorce Depot podcast. My name is Dr. Elinor Robin, and I am here at the Gainesville Podcast Studio with my friend and colleague Nehemiah Harmon. And we would not be having this podcast would it not be for Nehemiah's technical abilities. Today, my guest is Linda Hershman. She's going to tell me if I mispronounce that. You're going to tell me, Linda, the correct pronunciation. I should have asked you before we started. And Linda, did I get it right? Or
no problem.
I did? Hershman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Hershman, not Hershman. Okay. And you can find her, you could find her, first of all, by looking for her book on Amazon, which is entitled Gray Divorce, which is the topic of today's episode. It's what we're going to talk about. And Linda is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And Linda, where do you practice? What city are you in?
I am in suburban Philadelphia. And If I could just add, Elinor, the full title of the book is Gray Divorce, Everything You Need to Know About Later Life Breakups.
And I thought it was really important to have you here today because, in fact, gray divorce, I don't know, you'll tell me if it's after 55, after 60, after 65, what constitutes a gray divorce is very different from an earlier life divorce for a variety of reasons. So, I think we are ready to begin, and if you have any questions, you can find Linda, in addition to finding her on Amazon with her book. What is your website, Linda?
The website is Linda Hershman, HERSHMAN.com.
Perfect. Okay. So, Linda, tell me first, why is gray divorce so different from divorce of younger people?
Well, because the issues we're dealing with in later life tend to be different. And also, let me give the definition. Gray divorce, I did not coin the term. The term was coined by a couple of sociologists who wrote the seminal book on gray divorce, I think around 2010. And the official definition is splitting up after age 50.
Okay.
And when you think about the issues we're facing when we're over age 50, they're very different than they are when people get divorced when they're younger. One of the big concerns that people have is who is going to take care of me? And am I going to end up alone? And those are not typically the kinds of things you think about when you're divorcing at 30 or 40. And and so there are a lot of later life and end of life issues that people are questioning when they're thinking about or they're pursuing gray divorce.
Mm-hmm. I see. And I know for me, which of course I'm dealing with a different angle on gray divorce. We help people get their legal divorce. Of course, we're aware that the psychological divorce is a huge factor. The social divorce is a huge factor. The financial divorce is a huge factor. But primarily, my work is focused on the legal divorce. Your work is not. You are focusing on what I would call the emotional divorce, the psychological divorce, the identity divorce, and the social divorce, because you're helping people really make their way through. So what do you see are the issues that people are facing from your perspective, your clients? What are they facing as they move through a gray divorce?
In terms, we can break this down in terms of gender a little bit, because again, the number one fear that both males and females, and I do address in my book mixed orientation and LGBT marriages as well, but for the purposes of this conversation, we'll be talking about heteronormative marriages. Again, both men and women are worried about who is going to take care of me. Well, women worry most about who is going to take care of me. Men and women worry about how is this going to financially impact me.
Ooh.
Men worry about how is this going to impact my relationship with my adult children, because men are far more impacted in their relationships with their adult children than women are. And women are more worried about, am I going to end up alone? Because statistically speaking, even though there is a high rate of remarriage or nowadays living together after gray divorce, it's much higher for men, and they partner more quickly after a gray divorce. And so those are the primary concerns that are both in common and a little bit different.
I mean, ironically, everybody, even if you stay married to the bitter end, people are going to one is going to end up dead and the other one's going to end up alone. That's just the reality of life. But I know that upon divorce, it hits people in the face that this is I guess maybe until then they have, some idea that they're just going to stay together and die holding hands they're going to hold hands from two different beds in the nursing home. I mean, we hear those stories where people die within moments of each other, but that's so few and far between that I think divorce, because it shakes us to our core, it brings up all those issues of, am I going to be alone? But it is reality, yeah. And the adult children, I can see that women would put more faith in their adult children than men would. But I think from my perspective, it's not really fair to the adult children to be anything more than a monitor. I personally would not want to disrupt my children's lives to be my caretaker. But I'm fortunate that I don't have to. I know that some people do have to. They have no other option.
And
So,
that
go ahead.
is a very big point, Elinor, because the thing that people would find most surprising about divorcing later in life is the impact it has on the adult children. We operate under the assumption that they're adults, they have their own lives, they can handle it, and it's minimized. In fact, there's a term for it. It's called ambiguous loss, and that is losses that are not generally recognized by society as losses, that don't get validated, that don't have rituals around it. And adult children of divorce, or ACODs as the acronym goes, are in many ways even more deeply impacted than their younger counterparts. And just fun fact for you, the worst time for parents to divorce is when their kids are leaving for college.
And why is that?
Because and this is especially when the kids are going away, but it's in general, when the kids are leaving for college, they are looking to individuate. This is their first real opportunity to be away from home, or to be in an environment different from the neighborhood school where they grew up. They're meeting all kinds of people. They're exposed to a lot more things that they can explore and get involved with. And it is their time to start to figure out who they are and individuate from their families. And when their parents are getting divorced, they have one foot there at school and they have one foot worrying about what's going on at home. Are my parents okay? Are my siblings okay? Where am I going to be when I come home for Christmas vacation? And the other thing is, it puts a lot of emotional burden and responsibility on the kids, because if the parents had a transactional marriage where they co-parented very well, where they got along really well, they just didn't have that spark, and their parents divorce when they go off to college or even later than that, the kids start to question, was my whole life a lie? Was my childhood a lie? I didn't see this happening. And when it's a conflictual marriage and the parents stayed together, quote unquote, for the sake of the kids, that's a burden on the children to have to get to develop that belief that my parents were unhappy and they only stayed together because of me.
Makes sense. I often feel that the middle school years are the worst years for people to divorce for their children, only because middle school is such a horrible time, kind of across the board. But I could see, though, how the middle schooler is so preoccupied that that going off to college might be worse. Of course, going off to college is an enormous transition also. So,
and it's even worse for ACODs of color or in underserved communities, because they tend to have a lot more responsibility, a lot more financial responsibility and caretaking responsibility at home to begin with. And so when they go off to college and their parents divorce, it often adds an extra financial or caretaking burden on them.
Burden. Interesting. So if you could give advice to someone who is going through a gray divorce, a divorce after age 50, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think let's separate a little bit between whether you're divorce questioning or whether you're actually divorcing, and whether you chose the divorce or whether it was being imposed upon you.
Yes.
So if you are divorce questioning, and let me just say that I'm a neutral in this. I don't take a position. My job as a marriage counselor and also as a discernment counselor for people who are trying to make a decision about whether to get divorced or go to marriage counseling is that if there's even a little chance that you might go the marriage counseling track, do everything you can to make sure that this is where you really want to be.
Right.
Because, as we know, the grass isn't always greener.
True.
And so if you're divorce questioning and you're both willing to go to marriage counseling, try that first. If you're not sure whether or not to go to marriage counseling, try discernment counseling, and you can get some more information about that in my book or online. And if you are already in the process, the first thing I would say for anybody who's getting divorced is do your work, because you don't want to jump into another relationship and repeat the same patterns. Because whether or not you initiated the divorce, and also I want to say that 66% of gray divorces are initiated by women. But even if you initiate the divorce, in relationships function in patterns. Everybody brings their own unhealthy part into a dysfunctional pattern, and So, what you want to do is go to therapy, do your work so that whatever it was that you were bringing into it, you're not repeating the same patterns. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the same marriage with a different person the
Right.
next time
Right.
around. And again, if you are divorcing, as you said, don't put the burden on your children.
Yes.
One of
Yeah.
my laws of Linda is that no matter how old your children are, they're still your children. They're not your
Yeah.
friends. Do not
Yeah.
confide in them. Do not drag them into it. Do not have them be a go between. Do not put any of that responsibility on them. Do not tell them all the terrible things that your soon to be ex partner did. Let them be your children, support them, validate their feelings, and give them an opportunity to talk about their feelings.
Yes, good advice. Very good advice. My advice, of course, because remember I come to this from a slightly different perspective. My advice, whereas I am not a fan of most divorces needing attorneys, I think that probably only about 20% of divorces really need divorce lawyers. But when someone is going through a gray divorce, I think they probably need to go and talk to a wills, estates, and trust lawyer. So that would be my advice. Before you go talk to a divorce lawyer, go talk to a wills, estates, and trust lawyer if you're over 50 and getting a divorce. So on that note, I want to thank you for being here with me, Linda Hershman.
You're welcome.
And
And if I could just say, Eleanor, that
yes, yes, please.
if people go onto my website and
Mm-hmm.
sign up for the email list, they can get a copy of tips on how to talk to and how not to talk to your adult children if you're going through divorce.
Ah, perfect, perfect. All right. I do have on my website, the A Friendly Divorce website, a divorce bibliography, and I'm going to first of all have to make sure I add your book there. And I do have a bunch of books for adult children of divorce, but I'm going to make sure that sometime in the next day or so I add your book on. And I want to thank you for being here with me. So thank
Thank
you,
you so
Linda.
much for having me.
All righty. Bye, everybody.